No.
Welcome,
Yeah.
welcome to the show. Good morning. It's an earlier morning than we normally record. You're super early over there. You're Central
No, it's
Time.
not super
Oh,
early. It's 8:30 in the morning. Come
yeah.
on.
I mean, I get up at 8. I get up at 5 a.m. every morning. So
Really?
yeah.
Why
So
just why?
uh, you got to get the stuff done, man.
Okay.
You
Yeah.
got to get the work in.
It's a good reason.
Absolutely. My guest today is the competition director of CrossFit, Mr. Adrian Bozman. Welcome to the show, sir. How are you doing?
I am well. I got up super early for many, many years of my life when I was doing a lot more active coaching and stuff like that. And now that I don't have to get up that early, I choose not to.
Yeah.
But it's
Well,
not like I'm sleeping in every day, but
I
no,
al-
and
I also
I'm not getting up at 5.
I also have kids, so you gotta,
Yeah.
you
Okay.
kind of gotta play with it where you can. I've got 4 kids, so they tend to not
Oh,
let
that's
you,
awesome.
even when you do get to sleep in, they don't let you sleep in.
Yeah.
There's 6 a.m. ready to go. So 5 a.m. is the only time I get like a little bit of me time. Get up, do my thing, get my routine going, and get the whole day started.
Yeah.
And
Awesome.
that also means early to bed too. So try and get done and get out of all the daily routine stuff and then
Yeah.
go to bed early so that we can start the day on a good note.
How old are your kids?
14, 10, 6, and 3.
Oh, wow, that's quite the range.
I
That's
got the
awesome.
spread. I got the spread. Yeah. So yeah, my 14-year-old, she is big into horses and like if she could live on a farm and do all that, that would be what she would do 24/7. And then there's my 10-year-old who's the CrossFit junkie,
Oh, right on.
gymnastics. She does gymnastics, CrossFit. She's big into WWE, and she's a little diva. And then the boys, the boys are coming along, play baseball and stuff like that. So
Man,
we
that's
keep
so cool.
we keep it busy, we keep it active.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah, and you have time to do this too. I mean, man, good for you.
I have some time,
Yeah.
so I jump in when I can. But man, how have you been? How is kind of the come down from this past month been for you? We're a day away from September, so we're almost a full month removed, from the games. But how have you been recovering and kind of getting back to life?
I've been good. The first week after the games was pretty low speed. Didn't really do much. Didn't talk to many people. Just kind of kept to myself, which is great. It's just hanging out with my wife, which is nice.
Awesome.
And yeah, and then we kind of right back into it. I mean, I think as everybody knows, we're going to be changing venues this year. So a lot of work going in behind the scenes on that to finalize some things. So this year we kind of got right back into it in some ways. Maybe not the full steam kind of all in type of pre-games planning that has to be that kind of hectic. But yeah, we're kind of right back into it. And I got a little bit of time coming up in September. My birthday is this month, so I'm taking a little time at the end of the month, and so just trying to get my ducks in a row until then. It's hard to believe it's only been a month since the games. It feels like
Oh
so
no.
much has happened. So like it really does. It feels like that was so far in the rear view at
It
this point.
does. It does. It's crazy kind of everything that's gone on since then for, even just for me. I mean, for you, obviously you have the whole games and everything that you're doing with the team. And I know Dave kind of alluded to it in the search for Madison. Is it kind of the same? Was it where basically they came off the last year in Carson, and a week into it, he got the phone call of, he said in the press conference, he got the phone call of like, "Hey, we need to go search these locations." He's like, "I don't want to. I just, I just, I just, I don't want to go and do anything related to the games right now." And then a week later, he's touring Madison, and he said Chattanooga and a couple different places. Is that kind of how this process is going?
No, I mean this year we had a little bit more lead time than the last time that we moved in 2016 moving into 2017. So we already had a few places in mind and that sort of thing. So it's more so you just have to dot the i's and cross the t's and yeah, go through the process. It just takes time to get everything lined up to the point that you're like, yes, it's final and now we can announce. And to be honest, like I don't want to talk too much about that because
Yeah.
we get in these conversations where it's like I can't really talk about anything, and then like I'm put in a position to kind of dance around it, and I'm like I hate having to do that. So I don't want to talk.
I wasn't
I
gonna ask
know,
you where.
no, I know, but
I
even
know that's
even
the
like
annoying
things around the
question right now.
process and stuff like that, it's like yeah, it just it's just weird to be in a spot where you're like, hey, it's not because I don't want to be talking about it. It's because I can't yet,
Yeah.
and because we're not final. We're getting close. And so, CrossFit Games fans, you guys can expect some news coming up in the next short term here. Yeah, and then everybody will know, and it'll be great.
I like it, which was
Yeah.
actually it's funny because around the time of, Wadapalooza, I interviewed Don Fall, and it was kind of the
Oh,
same
awesome.
thing because Birmingham wasn't, like, locked,
Yeah. Yeah.
and he was like, "Well, you're gonna know something in the next couple weeks,"
Well,
and
yeah, and that's a great example, right? Is that everybody ran with, "Oh, you're going to Birmingham," and we're like, "No, we haven't decided yet, and we haven't announced anything publicly yet," but
yeah,
the perception is already out there, and and then people are just taking it as fact, and that's a very difficult thing when they're confronted with the reality, which is, "Oh, actually, that's not the plan, and
yeah.
here's the real plan." Now it's a big thing. It's like, well, this was only a reality that was constructed by people that bought into it early and then ran with it. You know what I mean? So trying to avoid that type of situation.
Yeah. I mean, I would rather have a definite answer than
Yeah,
speculate on,
exactly. Yeah, yeah,
on when
yeah.
and where and all that sort of stuff.
But
Now
but I will say, like, hey, we're stoked. It's going to be awesome. There's already tons of ideas that we're generating around the potential. So yeah, I'm very excited. All that
cool.
said,
That was gonna kind of be one of my questions as far as, like, programming on that side of it. Madison had so much of of that city that you could kind of play with, and I don't know, how early I mean, I'm sure you're already thinking about what you wanna do next for the upcoming season for, semis and CrossFit Games and all that. But does some of that kind of be put on hold until it's like, "Okay, when this is finalized, now I know this is the playground I get to play in, and now I get to, like, do something with this, but for the most part, we're just gonna program, like, right down the center to go anywhere."
yeah, I mean, I think that anytime, I guess the way I approach it is like you always want to have your ideal state as the goal. And so, regardless of the canvas you have or the creative process that you're doing, like, yeah, you should aim for the highest expression of that thing. And then there's going to be the real world constraints that come in and mold it anyway. And so, if you start with those kind of limitations, I think sometimes it can diminish the final thing. So, in my opinion, you might as well start with like, all right, let's look at the big, bad, hairy. What can we do with all the potential in the world? And then, by nature of going through the process of staffing it and putting a schedule around it and trying to show it on TV and all these types of things, it's going to change anyway. And so, you might as well start there.
Yeah,
So, yes, to answer the question, yeah, big picture first, and then we start looking at the the structure that we have around that.
yeah. Well, and even with that, we got into year 5 before we got to, like, really explore Madison with the Capitol, you know? S
Yeah. Well, I'll
so, I
push
mean
back on that a little bit. I mean, I think every year we were in Madison, we were on the lakes. I mean, we had,
yeah.
the 21. Dude, I mean, I think that's still one of the longest distances that we've covered in CrossFit Games history was that event that they paddled all the way across the lake. I
Mm,
mean, that's pretty significant to start on one side, have that, I think it was like 3 miles or 3K across the
yeah,
lake. That kind of harkens back to the old Pendleton days in the early Carson days, where I mean that probably was the longest distance that we've ever covered. But I think 2021 was pretty close. So anyway, all that to say, like I think we used Madison and the surrounding city as much as we could
yeah.
while we were there.
I just meant as kind of that crescendo, like that
Sure. Yeah.
Madison, like, man, there's that moment. Like, everybody
Yeah.
remembers the moment of of the Capitol and all
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Not so much that we didn't use Madison because Madison has been great. I've got to be there
Absolutely.
5 out of the 6 years.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah,
Oh, cool.
I wasn't there in 2017, started
Okay.
volunteering in 18.
Yeah.
Obviously, 2020 miss, and then
You timed it perfectly then because, first year you can kind of be getting your feet under you, and then once you kind of know the ins and outs and tricks of the venue, then that second year can really really
yeah.
smooth things out. So you timed it perfectly.
Yeah, I'm looking forward. Listen, wherever the games goes, I'm looking forward to it because I know the product that you guys put out, and it
Yeah,
was
right on.
this year was fantastic.
Yeah,
Kudos to you and the whole entire
thank you.
team. If I didn't say that on site, want to of course say
I
that
appreciate
publicly.
that.
I thought this year was probably one of the best years that I've ever experienced.
Oh, thanks.
Not only as a volunteer, but also as part of the press and spectating and kind of doing all that. It was just incredible.
Yeah, cool. What stood out to you about it? Like, I'm always curious when people are like, "Oh," and because I don't know, man. I've been involved in the games for a long time, and I think every year has so many cool moments to it. And then on the other side of that, like the critical work aspect, there's so many things where you're like, okay, well, we could have done that a little differently, or maybe this could be pushed in this direction. And so I'm always curious. I think we do a pretty good job of taking critique, and internally we have a lot of feedback that we pass around our teams and stuff like that. I'm always curious though when people are like, "Oh, I really loved it." I'm like, "Oh, let's be specific so that we can try to do that again."
Yeah. In all honesty, when it came to the programming this year, it felt like and I know the emphasis is always on the athletes performing,
Okay.
but I think, in the past couple of years, it's come down to, "Oh, well, this event, if this or that," and we're talking more about the event than we are about the athletes and what they're doing, and I felt like this year, I think, showcased the ability to do new things and different things, but in such a way where that wasn't the story.
Mm, yeah.
And love or hate, I didn't mind the crossovers, but people, were talking about it as a point of contention of, oh, this and that, and it was this, and oh, Tia tripped on a single under, and I'm like, these are all things that they should be able to do,
Hmm.
but they're talking about the event and not talking about the performances. And this was a very, to me, the performance of
Yeah.
the athletes and the showcase of what they can do. Um, and nothing was I hate the word gimmicky because I don't think anything last year was a
Sure.
gimmick
Yeah.
either, but people refer to things as being gimmicky, and I liked the fact that this was, something that everybody could look at, everybody could understand what was going on, and it was just like, wow, this is just an incredible show. So I thought that was done almost better than I've ever seen it this year. Just the way that everything kind of went together, and I don't know the behind the scenes of what made all that happen, you know,
Yeah.
but it felt awesome to be able to just focus on the performance. And yeah, it sucked that there were injuries and things like that that kind of
Yeah, of course.
took away from it. But in looking at that event, I can't say that, there was anything to do with the programming. It's just a fluke injury that happened, you know?
Hmm.
It just it's something that happens in any sport. You don't wanna see injury, but, as safe as you can be, it's gonna happen. So, I think that was the biggest takeaway for me is that, man, it was a show. It was something that we could really get behind and push and show the athletes more than, you know, nitpick about a program or nitpick about an item or something that people were using.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. I appreciate that, and I'm glad that that came through. I mean, that is, in my opinion, such an important thing, to be able to showcase the range that these athletes have. I mean, they have all worked so hard to get to that stage, especially in the modern CrossFit Games era. I mean, just qualifying to a semifinal competition is pretty ridiculous. I mean, that'll be the fittest people that most people ever encounter,
Mhm.
are semifinalists, and then to take it that next step and be the cut above that actually get to the games. Yeah, it's good that we can showcase what breadth they have developed. So I'm glad that that came through. That's good.
Yeah, and I loved, kind of the way the cuts were too. It wasn't it didn't feel aggressive.
Hmm.
It felt fair. It felt like everyone got tested,
Yeah,
would in a perfect world, would we love to see everybody compete? Of course. But time and money and airtime and all those things have
yep,
to be
sure.
taken into account. You have to be smart about it. And I
Yeah,
think I think it filtered the right way, to me anyways.
yeah. I think the cuts discussion is always going to be one of those things where people are going to have their opinions one way or the other, and that's fine. Like, I'm not here to convince them either way, frankly. But I think our job is to just be as early as we can in announcing those cuts. And I think in the past we've done, you know, I think this year and last year we've been better about getting earlier, information out there to the athletes about that cut schedule. In the past, I mean, there's been some pretty aggressive, surprise.
Yeah.
There's going to be cuts type of situations, and I get it. Like, that's really hard, as an athlete that's been prepping all year to be hit with something like that. So, regardless of what we do in the future, I think the job for us is to continue to try to be earlier with announcing these types of things and just being totally transparent with the athletes about what they can expect.
Yeah.
At least insofar as that, there's always going to be some CrossFit Games surprises. That's part of the deal. But some of those kind of more routine, just competition schedule type aspects, yeah,
Mhm.
just getting them out there early. I think that mitigates a lot of it, and regardless of where you fall, pro cuts, anti cuts, wherever, um, if that's out there earlier, I think it's more palatable either way.
Yeah. And let's be honest, at the end of the day, unless you are like a super, a super nerd when it comes to the stats, you don't
Hmm.
necessarily remember who the top 10 was, or even the top 20. Definitely not the 30 or 40. You
Yeah,
remember those top performances, you remember the podium finishers and things like that. Not to take away from anything that anybody's done,
yeah, yeah,
but at the end of the day, when you're tracking sports, nobody's looking at the bottom of the standings,
yeah.
and that's what people are nitpicking about. So,
Yeah, and I think there is a valid argument in there about, well, you have to have enough breadth before you start implementing cuts. Sure, I totally
mhm,
accept that. But what I don't like as much as an argument, I kind of reject it, is when somebody says, "Oh, well, if this test was here, this person would have." And you're like, "Well, you're arguing the bottom of the heap at this point." And again, I mean, these are phenomenal athletes. No slight against them; they're all phenomenal. I think we can take that as just an accepted. But at the end of the day, it's like, man, if you have 6, 7 opportunities and you can't make it past that first cut, I don't think it's the order of the tests at that point. I think it's you weren't well-rounded enough to hang with that field,
yeah.
and that's the way it is. That's just the way competition unfolds sometimes.
Well, and I thought this year was balanced. There was nothing glaring that was like, "Oh my gosh, they didn't test any of this, and then
Right.
they cut a whole bunch of people, and now they're testing,
Yeah.
a different skill set." So
Right.
that's where I feel like, it was fair, it was balanced, and definitely people get over the shock of, "Yeah, we're gonna have cuts." Okay, but was it fair? Yes.
Mhm. Yeah.
Again,
Did you get it? Did you get a good shake to make it to that next checkpoint?
absolutely, yeah.
That's the goal. Yeah.
Yep. And man, there were people that didn't show up, and
Yeah, it's interesting,
there were
right? You see that
surprises.
too. You see that too, where you have somebody who, man, by all accounts, they just tore it up at semis, or they're looking like they're unstoppable. And then, for whatever reason, just doesn't come together on that weekend. And I think that's something that's missed sometimes, is just how human that all is. And I think that's where some of the more statistically minded people have a bit of a blind spot sometimes, because they have so much information that they think is bulletproof, but you can't account for everything. And at the end of the day, that's why you run the race, right? I mean, I say that all the time, but I do think there's a very human element to that too, where it's like, sometimes there's an X factor and it just doesn't come together despite your best efforts, despite the camp around you. Um, I mean, that's the nature of sport, and there is a lot of pressure on these athletes. I mean, this is their one opportunity at this season, to really put it on the line. And if it doesn't come together in that weekend, I mean, that's a tough break.
Mhm.
But that is the reality sometimes.
Yeah, and listen, that's why we play the game, right? If it were just about, "Hey, that person's gonna win, just hand them the trophy."
Yeah, yeah, and I think the other thing too, kind of getting back to this idea of just how ridiculous these athletes all are, is when you get to that collection point where you have the top 40 men and women, excuse me, that field and the depth of that field is very different than even a semifinal, where you could have a standout performance and you're really looking like a world beater, but all of a sudden you're no longer the tallest tree in the forest. It's like you're among all of the other tall trees in the forest. It's a little bit of a different scenario. And so it's funny, sometimes you see some people do some ridiculous feats of athleticism, and yet, quote unquote, they're underperforming. You're like, no, no, they're not underperforming. They're just in a field that is appropriately challenging for them,
Yeah.
and they're not always going to come out on top in that scenario.
Well, and it goes back to something I think Pat Sherwood used to say, is that you have to be it's amazing how good you have to be just to
Yeah,
suck at the CrossFit Games.
totally. Yeah. Yep.
And also, looking back, we kinda got into this spoiled state with Tia and Matt where it's like, "Oh, all these people are just not nearly as good as these 2." And again, they are fantastic and phenomenal at what they do, but it's like, you get into this thing where we don't have to have somebody pulling away by 500-600 points
Right,
every,
right.
every single competition every year. We don't have to have a three-peat for, we don't have to have repeat champions. I think it's fun when we have variety, when you have people coming up and showing that, they are fit on all
Mm.
different levels.
Yeah, keeps it exciting for sure.
Yeah. So was there anything this year that any event that surprised you, or maybe you programmed it one way but then you looked at it and you're like, "Huh, I didn't necessarily see it how, how it would play. I didn't really see it that it would play out that way." Anything that kind of, you took away from it was like, "Oh, that was cool. That wasn't the intention, but cool how it turned out."
Oh, that's let me think. My knee jerk is the women's ski bag. I was a little surprised at how many women time capped on that one. I thought that that would be a little bit of a faster race on the women's side. Um, so that one was, maybe we could have added a minute to that time cap, but I don't think it was a bad result, just a little bit different than what we had experienced in testing. And I think, what the athletes have been through coming into that one,
Mhm.
they were definitely a little under, and understandably so. Again, that's the hardest thing to replicate when you are testing, is that true competition intensity. It's almost impossible to replicate that, even when you have athletes that are chomping at the bit. It's just a different environment when you got a stadium full of people screaming for you, and there's actually like a whole year's training on the line. That's very different environment than closed doors. Okay, let's take a run at this.
Yeah.
So you can't always account for that. Anyway, so the ski bag women, I think, was one. On the team side, actually, the first team event, it was a bit of a repeat, for one of the events that got kind of rain modified in 22.
Mhm.
And yeah, it was a little over programmed. Nobody finished it, which at the end of the day, it wasn't the end of the world, because at least it was consistent. It just turned into an AMRAP for all teams. But that is definitely something that wasn't the intent there. So that's definitely a bit of a miss, at least when it's on paper. I don't think it affected the competition. Still a totally appropriate event. But as far as like intention versus reality, that was one that was a bit of a mismatch. Trying to think what else. I'd have to comb through a little more.
Sure.
It's funny. I'll tell you where we got a little gun shy. Actually, was with Helena. We had a 10-minute time cap originally, and we're like, man, it's on TV. Like, it'd be great if everybody finishes. We should probably add a little buffer there to an 11-minute time cap. And at the end of the day, it's great. There's nothing wrong with having a little extra
Sure.
buffer there. But it's funny that we didn't need it. When push came to shove, it's like, okay, that was 10 was fine.
Yeah. And I thought, and it was fantastic just being in the Coliseum watching that event. And I know, being
Yeah,
able to see all the different camera angles and everything that was going on with it. It was just such a fun event. That one was just fun.
yeah.
Um, w- Pivoting a little bit, you of course we have, everybody talks about the elites and everybody talks about the teams. How much of a hand do you have in the adaptive and age groups?
Oh, tons. So yeah, the programming for that was mostly my responsibility, and I always say mostly because like it's always a pretty big effort to filter that through various different people and make sure that we get it as good as we can, as bulletproof as we can.
Mhm.
But yeah, the original kind of drafting of all that was my responsibility. Yeah, so that was fun. They were actually, there were some faster performances in that than I thought there would be. The pulling power one, I think, was a little faster. It's interesting because there's a big spread on that one.
Yeah.
You had some people that just absolutely dusted it, and then a couple people that would time cap in every heat as well. So that one, I think, was a real separator for some athletes. Um, I'm trying to think back what else in that competition. I thought it was really cool to see Helen done with all of those age groups, and just to see some of the times coming across. It's always a fun game to play for some of us in the younger masters brackets to be like, could I keep up with the 60 and 65 plus champs? I don't think I could.
Yeah. Uh,
So
and I was watching, I got to, see some of those events. I was volunteering most of the time during the masters and age groups, or the age groups and adaptives. So I only got to see a little bit of it, at the end of the day. But going and seeing them, just man, just incredible. Just incredible things that they're
yeah,
they're doing. And I had to go and reset one of the fields, for,
Oh,
I
right
went at
on. Yeah.
I
Okay.
was I was doing fan experience, but they put me out on the gear for, like, one changeover, and we had to go flip the pigs and pull the jerry cans, and I'm like, "Good night. These things are no joke." You know,
Yeah.
and and I'm looking around, I'm 43. So, of course, I'm looking around at, kind of the same age, and I'm like, "This is just a
Hmm.
different breed. These are this
Oh, for
this is
sure.
not the same."
No, they're all absolute savages. It's so cool to see them out there doing their thing. Yeah, and it's fun. Yeah, the Masters competition I think is it's really tricky in the sense that there is a lot to consider. I mean, obviously every age division, they're not all completely different. Like there are definitely kind of groupings that you can make mentally,
Sure.
but you really have to try to comb through it as best you can for every division and make sure that you're making the right choices. And that takes a lot of work and a lot of attention. And and to be fair, like we don't always get it right. There are definitely some times that we put something out there for a particular age group, and it's like, oh man, it was a little too heavy or a little too light or whatever. So
Um, some of the questions that have come to me, I had some episodes during the games with, some people in the adaptive community, and of course the question of, you know, coverage and those sorts of things.
yeah,
The conversation we actually had is it's a little bit of both. You want better coverage, but you also have to show up. Like you have to show up. You have
yeah,
to be there. You have to support, so I don't throw the whole onus on CrossFit for, hey, we need to give you this thing on a golden platter, and if nobody shows up, great. So I'm kind of putting the onus on both. But what are some things that you look at from, even from this year? I know with, kind of doing ESPN and kind of getting that whole deal together, there was kind of a time crunch with announcing and what was actually going to happen. What are some things looking forward that, um, on the CrossFit side of it, that you're bringing to the table for the adaptive and age group community to kind of come up a bit?
yeah. Well, again, I don't want to get in a position where we're talking too much about the 24 season
Hmm.
because we're just not in a point that we're ready to be final about that. But I think you nailed it. I think at the end of the day, it's really just about setting expectation early. I think we did a poor job of setting the expectation around, okay, this is how we're going to show the age groupers. And, admittedly, I think it was pretty disappointing for a lot of people. I get it.
Hmm.
Um, but, I think a lot of that is kind of couched in past expectation of, okay, this is what I've seen, in another year. Therefore, I should expect exactly the same thing this year. And when that's a mismatch, yeah, that's pretty hard to stomach. So I get that. So I think that's really what is one of the biggest aspects of our job is once we have a plan that we've thought through and we think is the most appropriate thing to do, it's getting that information out there and saying, okay, this is how we're going to do it. This is why we want to do it this way. And then let that be known so that people don't come in with an expectation that is, vastly different than what ends up happening. And I agree with you. I do think that there is a lot of lip service around the age group divisions in particular, and they're a huge, huge portion of people that participate in the sport, and that's so awesome and such a cool thing to be able to support. Like that really is important.
Yeah.
However, at the end of the day, it is also true that they're not really what people are there to watch, and we see that time and time again. Even when we've had years that we've had fully supported streaming of all of those age group categories. It's really unfortunate. We hear a lot of people say this is so great, but we don't see a lot of people actually watch and tune in.
Yeah.
So there's a big mismatch there, unfortunately. And I don't have the answer right now as to how to bridge that gap. Certainly would hope that we can do that, but yeah, it is one of those kind of interesting phenomena where you have a lot of loud voices that are talking about this particular aspect of it. But when you look at the actual participation rates, as far as people viewing, people showing up to be at these competitions, I mean, there's some great large masters competitions in the ecosystem, and again, like their attendance, yeah, I mean, they do all right, but it's not like they have people beating down the doors to get there,
Yeah.
unfortunately. So I agree. I think it's a two-way street. Like if people really want to support this stuff, then awesome. I'm all for it. They should be there showing up and supporting. That's absolutely great. And then on our side, like I said, we need to be early. We need to be transparent about our plans, and we just need to set that expectation so that people know what they can be watching.
Yeah. And one of the things that I'll just kind of throw out there, and this is it's everything, hindsight's 2020. But in that
Yeah.
communication process, had, maybe it been communicated earlier, somebody could have possibly stepped up and done like we did in Orlando. So I was part of that team in Orlando that broadcast events 1 and 3 with Chase
Oh, okay,
with
cool.
Chase
Yeah.
and Adrian.
Yeah.
So, I was part of that team. So, hey, maybe put it in the hands of some of the creators and say, okay, we'll
Sure.
go ahead and, support you, but, here's kind of some tools to help get the word out and get things shown.
Yeah.
It's not going to be, as we as we saw in Orlando, it's not going to be, the normal broadcast everybody's used to, but you at least get to see something.
Mhm.
So just ideas that I throw out there.
Yeah, and I think that's something we're getting a lot more comfortable with. You saw it this season. We had a couple of behind the scenes crews and kind of opened up to outside media in a way that we hadn't in quite some time. Which, in my opinion, is really healthy. I mean, this is not really my lane, so to speak. Obviously, I've got some influence there, but like I don't work in media. I don't work in, if you want to call it the marketing side of things.
Mhm.
That's not where my head is. And like I said, that's not that I don't have any influence there, but it's not my primary focus. On that side, though, I do think it is really healthy that, there's a lot of people out there that are doing a lot of great work and have a lot of reach. Why wouldn't we want them, included in what we're doing? So I agree with you on that front.
I love it. I love it. Well, I'm looking forward to next year, but there's some things I want to talk to you about, not CrossFit related. You are a big music buff. You are big into music.
Oh boy,
So
I play one on TV,
play play it on TV. Well, I had an episode, and I think I talked to you about this at the games a little bit, joking around that I had an episode with Tommy Marquez where we created our own festival, like our own music festival. And we had a whole bunch of bands, and you pretty much shot holes in all of Tommy's like headliners.
Oh, that's right. That
uh,
was fun. Maybe, and I don't know how serious. I'd have to go back and listen to that again. I don't know how serious I was, or how much I was just trying to give Tommy a hard time. Maybe a bit of both. We'll see.
so Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Oh yeah, the worst.
That's where I was going. I mean, it's one of those things where I know all their music, but I think you've made a point of saying, but who has any of their albums? Like, you know it because it plays on
Uh,
the radio, but, like, do people go out and actually buy it?
oh man.
And,
Yeah.
and I think one of the other ones was that you picked on was Foo Fighters and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and Dave
Okay.
Grohl.
Yep.
So those are the
Yep.
2. So what is the top 5 playlist of Boz when he is on
Oh
his own?
man, I hate that question. Top five. I mean, like top five when? Today? Top five last week? Top five last month? I mean, it's always changing. I don't think anybody's. I don't think. Here, here's a statement for you. I don't think anybody who's like legitimately interested in music and is exploring things actively with new music that's coming out and then trying to stay on top of old things that they like and appreciate has like a static top five. I don't believe that. I think that's just the soundbite that people create in their mind so that when they're asked the question, they have something to say.
Yeah,
But I don't think any real enthusiast is going to have like, well, this is it forever and ever.
yeah,
Maybe they have one thing that they come back to and they're like, well, John Coltrane's Love Supreme is the best album ever, full stop, period. Okay, cool. That's great. But I bet you couldn't go much further than that. You know what I mean? And then like stick to it.
sure.
So I very much feel that way anyway.
So then as far as like a playlist then for you, like is there a go-to? Like and I have different moods. So like I have a workout
Yeah.
mood where I want to be aggressive. I want to be aggressive and angry and I want to rip shit off the floor and so I'm
Mhm.
going for a certain mood. And then if I'm doing just like regular training work where I'm doing accessory stuff, I'll throw in some country,
And yeah.
not Enya,
Mhm.
not
Yeah.
quite
No?
Enya. But,
Come on, man.
uh,
Mind muscle connection.
Chandler Smith put me on to, Turnpike Troubadours, and
Okay.
I'm
Yeah.
just like, "Wow, these guys are awesome." So, I'll, like, go
Is
on
that is
that.
that a Jack White? No,
No,
that's the Recon Tours. I
no,
don't know. I get those guys.
the Reconnaisseurs, I think
Yeah.
no, Turnpike Troubadours, they're kind of like a country folk,
Shows what I know
coun
about
like a
music.
country folk band. But I love their style.
Oh, cool.
So
Okay. I'll check them
if
out.
you're going into we'll say workout or something that you just you need to get yourself in a certain headspace, what's your kind of is there a go-to, or is there like a type of playlist?
I mean, I too have many musical moods. I got a bunch of different playlists on Spotify. I I went to school to study music when I was a much younger man. It feels like another lifetime ago now. And I was lucky enough to be exposed to a lot of really cool things at that time. And so I have a lot of varied musical interests, and I would say 75% of them are probably not really great for working out. So when it comes to working out, like, I don't know, I'm a rocker at heart. So like I like kind of that end of things. Like recently, they called the Wine Lips that I've been just I love their latest album. So that's been a go-to on heavy repeat anytime I'm working out lately. Um yeah, that kind of like freak rock right now is kind of my jam.
Okay, and
Yeah.
who are some people kind of in that area? Because I'm always looking for new
Oh,
music, so I'm
like
definitely looking up the Wine Lips and like
yeah, Ty,
checking
Ty
things out.
Segall, he was like a big player, still is, I guess, in like that California kind of psych revival.
Okay.
John Dwyer, anything that he's a part of, like the OCs, are just phenomenal. They actually just put out a new album that's great, in my opinion. It's kind of like B-52s meets Motorhead, which I love. So
The
yeah,
OCs,
they're
not to be confused with the OC Supertones.
no,
Completely different.
yeah, no, definitely not. Who else would be kind of in that scene? I'm trying to think. And this is the problem, right? Like I always we start talking music and I just start drawing blanks. I'm like, oh yeah, whoops. But that's a great place to start, I would say. Like Ty Segall, uh, John Dwyer and the OCs, Wine Lips currently. Those are great places to start. There's a
Nice.
really cool French band called Slift that's like sort of in that kind of orbit, that I like a lot too. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm like, I listen to all genres, like, pretty much everything. So, like, I love music that goes with certain things,
Okay.
so, like,
Yeah.
I like movies that actually have really good music soundtracks,
Yeah. Sure.
as well, that just it just kinda adds to it. Like, the new Spider-Man, I went and saw that, and the original, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, the animated one, has just a really good soundtrack that I love to, like, throw in at the gym, and, it's kind of that hip hop and just like a fun vibe.
Yeah.
So I'm literally all over the place. I mean, as you can see, I've got, like, music back behind me, this side over here. Um,
Oh yeah.
th
Awesome. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's, so that's an original Chicago record that
Oh,
actually
nice.
I got from, like, a yard sale, and
Oh, amazing.
there's actually, back in the day when you'd get the screen prints or the iron-on prints, there's actually the iron-on print of that album still in the sleeve
Very cool.
to iron onto a shirt. I was like, "That's cool."
Yeah.
But my wife is from Rockford, Illinois, Chicago area, and then my family's from the Boston area. So that's actually a Massachusetts, but it's a Boston record, shaped as
Very cool, man.
Massachusetts. So I like music kind of infuses everything that we do.
Yeah.
So you went to school for music. What do you play instruments or
Not anymore. I can't even pretend. Like there was a time where I kind of hung on to that for a minute, but no. I mean, I yeah, there was a time in my life that I thought I was going to be a symphony player. That was kind of the pursuit. And again, I mean, we're talking this is ancient history, like more than 20 years ago now. So, yeah, then I played bass guitar for quite a while. I played in a couple of bands, doing that when I was young. Played drums for a little bit, kind of just I was self-taught for a while, and then I started taking lessons and had a kit, and then hadn't played in some time, and then we moved here, and my drums were just hanging out in my garage, and I'm like, it'd be great to set them up, but who am I kidding? I don't think I have the time to pursue this as a hobby anymore, time or interest, really, And my friend, he has a 13-year-old son who's just like really diving into music heavy, and he plays everything, right? Like he plays the viola, he plays piano, he plays, I think, saxophone, he sings in the choir, like he's
Oh,
all in,
wow.
So
Yeah,
it's like, dude, I think these drums are better suited to give to your son, than they are taking up space in my garage. So,
nice. So you were going to school for symphony,
yeah,
you said.
yep.
So, like, what yeah, explain that. Like, what were you doing with
Yeah, I played
symphony?
trombone.
Okay.
Wanted to play in the symphony. studied that kind of orchestral music. Yeah, that was my jam. I went to a small school in Western Canada that had a decent music program and a really well renowned jazz program. So I took a lot of jazz electives during that process. Um, yeah, that was it. I mean, it was like I said, this is an ancient history, long time ago. So my life obviously took a very different turn,
Well,
and I
I
think
find
what
it
I
very
took
interesting. Yeah.
what I took away from that is, like uh, not everybody is going to have the time, desire, interest, aptitude to pursue music full time as a career, and then that's okay. Like I think that's true for so many things. And I think there is this kind of pervasive myth that, like, well, if you just nose to the grindstone, you can do anything. It's like, yeah, it's sort of, and like that's a nice message. And I'm not saying in any sort of cynical way that people shouldn't pursue their dreams, but there's also a reality. Like sometimes, yeah, the pieces don't fit, and it's not the best thing for you to be doing, and you have to come to terms with that. I think everybody in their life at some point has to come to terms with that on some level, right? Like you have a relationship where you're like, man, this would be great if it was working out, but it's just not. And
Yeah.
I have to come to terms with that at some point. And that was me with pursuing music as a full time career and kind of life direction.
Well,
Um,
I feel that's very interesting that you go from, music, which is kind of can be a keyhole type career. Like the eye of the needle is so thin, so small to like really make big success,
sure.
to the same kind of thing with CrossFit. Um, because I mean, when we're talking about the top 40, I mean, that's
Yeah,
40 in the world. The eye of that needle is so small to just thread it, and you've got these athletes who are amazing that do it every single year. You've got your 10-year people, but then you have your people that, man, they do it once, and that's it. They never make it back, or they can't get back to that level, or they can't keep up, with the evolution of the sport. So I think it's an interesting, coincidence that you go from
I
one thing to another that's,
I
kind
don't
of.
know. I guess I'll push back on that and say that, like, I think a hierarchy exists in almost anything that you look at, right? Like whether that's collecting stamps or becoming a CEO of a Fortune 500. Like there's always going to be some degree of hierarchy. I think that's just the way human beings organize themselves. And I don't know that it's fair to say that one niche interest is comparable to another just because there happens to be like a very high um, peak. Like, sure, that's true all over the place. But look at the base. I mean, look at CrossFit as a base. I think it's a great example where there are plenty of people that are just killing it in their town. They're doing an awesome job with their community, and the people in close proximity to them, they don't have a big presence either, on social media or internet or whatever. But they're just killing it in their own way. And they're probably never going to be noticed by people outside of that direct sphere, and that's totally fine.
Yeah.
I think that can't be discounted just because there's like this really, really steep peak. And to be honest, I think music is the same way. Like had I or would I choose to do currently just like noodle around, get together in a garage and play some tunes with some friends? Like, could I absolutely do that now? Yes. And it's a conscious choice that I'm like, yeah, it's just not where I want to put my time and my effort right now. And again, to extend the analogy, I think like we truly live in a golden age, uh, kind of bringing it back to music, and in all forms of expression, really. I mean, you think like, man, there's so many cheap cynics out there that talk about, oh, there's no new music, there's no good music. I'm like, dude, you're just lazy
Yeah.
because there is more cool stuff happening now from more people doing all sorts of things that just either A, weren't possible previously, or B, there was no potential to hear about it because they couldn't get it out. They couldn't get a record deal. They couldn't get, exposure. Whereas now it's like, dude, I got this thing in my pocket that gives me instant exposure all the way around the world, basically for free.
Yeah.
Um, and you're trying to tell me that like that doesn't breed an ecosystem that's like rich and diverse? You're out of your mind.
Well, one of my favorite things to do is take Spotify, throw it on, take a one band and then throw it on radio mode and just see what happens.
Mhm.
And I've found so many bands based, just off of that, where it's like, oh, well, this kind of sounds like, this band. One of my favorite bands, and I don't know why I've just clicked with them, but My Chemical Romance.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know if you want to. smash holes in them or not, but
Now, man, I don't know you well enough yet. You know what I mean? I've known Tommy a long time. I can take pot shots at him.
no,
But
you can do it. You can do it. It's okay. I tell people all the time, I'm like, I'm not like your stereotypical My Chemical Romance fan. Like, I like their music and style and brand and
yeah,
things like that. But I'll throw that in, in like the okay, sounds like, and then get to like hear all these other little bands that I'd never heard before
yep,
that just pop up from it. And I've found so many other albums
yeah,
and
sure.
songs just because of that. Same thing with like one of my favorite country artists is Chris Stapleton,
Hmm.
just a phenomenal talent. And I go through and listen to kind of a playlist of his, and it's just like, wow, okay, found that. Okay, I'm
Yep,
gonna put a little star next to that one and go
yep,
back and listen to it. And it's just this endless, foray into music of just listening to all sorts of things that just make you happy. Like
yeah,
that's
for
me. Like
sure.
the music is just, whether it's angry music or sad music or whatever, it makes me happy. Like
Yep. No, I hear
it
you.
fills you up. So
Yeah,
I love it.
absolutely. Yep.
So what are some things outside of CrossFit that you're into you're out there in Colorado, correct?
No, I live
No,
in Nashville.
you live in Nashville. How
Hmm.
did I not
Yeah,
know that? Okay.
yeah. We moved here a couple years ago.
Okay. So like what kind of things do you do on your what I'll call downtime?
Oh
Which I'm sure
boy.
there's not much of it, but
It's funny. I kind of oscillate between. I don't even know what I oscillate between, but it's weird. Like I'd like to think that I am a person who's got varied interests and kind of pursues them. But at the end of the day, it's like the last couple seasons, I really haven't. Like it's been work and focus on the season, and obviously there's been a lot of changes in CrossFit world, and that's demanded a lot of attention. So like I don't really have a lot of outside things going on at this point. And I'm not trying to be like self-deprecating about that. It's just kind of the reality. So I am trying to kind of get back to doing things for me outside. Like I'm so lucky in the sense that like my job is amazing, and I feel very fortunate that I've been able to make a career out of CrossFit, which I didn't expect at all. Obviously, going from studying music to doing this forever, I never thought I'd have a career in anything, and here we are. Like I started working for CrossFit in 2007. So pretty phenomenal ride, and I feel very, very fortunate for all that. So I'm not trying to say that within this my job isn't stimulating or great or what I want to be doing. It's all of those things, but it's also very time intensive and hasn't left a lot of room for a lot else over the last few years. But like trying to do the jujitsu a little more,
okay.
hacking away at that, and that's a lot of fun. Do that a couple times a week. It's fun. I don't have any expectation with it, so that's a blast. I have like some projects that I'm trying to get worked out on. Like I have a little piece of land. I'm not super public about a lot of these kind of life things, but
Yeah.
it's takes a lot of work. I spend a lot of time out there kind of chopping trees and clearing out fields and stuff like that. So that's demanding a lot of my time lately, which is fun because man, it's just you and the ever growing Tennessee nature when you're out there, which is pretty intense. Like stuff grows so fast out here. It's crazy.
Oh yeah. Well, it was one of the one takeaway I had from the whole quarantine thing is that I had so much time to focus on things at the house and like, on our property and things like that. So I was able to actually like I I've never like really been a carpenter or done like, a lot of
Hmm.
hands-on stuff, but I just decided the back deck looks like it's rotting, so I'm gonna go ahead and replace it.
Yeah, right on.
And we're not talking like a
I love
small
stuff like that.
we're not talking a small job. This took
No, dive
probably
in. Yeah.
yeah, it was like 2 or 3 weeks, and it was like a multi-leveled, deck off the back, around the pool area with a fire pit. So I didn't go for anything easy.
Yeah. Awesome.
But YouTube videos are my friend. I checked out framing, grabbed some levels and some saws and, went to town on it, and it actually
How'd it go?
turned out great.
Yeah, right
Turned
on.
out phenomenal.
Yeah,
And then once we
nice.
stained and painted it, I put in a bar rail as well so that you could, have friends over and set up
I
bar
love it.
stools. I'm like, this I would do this. I would do this if I had time to do other things. So
Yeah, I love that, and, like, at heart, that's very much that speaks to me, like, I'm a DIYer. I think that's honestly part of the reason that they've kept me around at CrossFit is, like, I do kinda consider myself to be a bit of a Swiss Army knife. I've worn a lot of hats over the years with CrossFit, and, I love exactly what you just said, like, a project like that where you're like, "Well, I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm confident enough that I can teach myself how to do it, and, we're gonna go. So let's
yeah,
just do this." Yeah.
yeah, made a couple little mistakes here and there.
Yep.
Had a friend of mine make fun of
But
me
that's
because
part
of
of it too, right?
yeah. Oh, absolutely. I had a friend of mine make fun of me because it wasn't, I didn't do a herringbone pattern.
Okay.
He's like, Where's the herringbone? Where's the herringbone?" I'm like, "Whatever," because it just it's, straight slat
The
panels.
correct question is, like, where were you when we were putting that in?
Well, I actually put a corner in and
Mhm.
made the 2 corners, it was kinda like a arched corner, and I made that corner herringbone. Sent him a picture. I was like, "Ha
There you go.
I figured it out. Here's your
Yeah,
herringbone."
yeah,
But a lot of that stuff of just like, hey, trial and error, figuring things out. I love that kind of stuff.
yeah.
Projects and things where okay, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I've got YouTube and some time, so we'll go nuts with it.
Yeah, and well, it's funny when you get into things like that because most of the time in the beginning, I think it's easy to convince yourself, like, "What if it goes wrong?" And you're like, "Well, actually, as the projects play out, there's so much time that any mistake is, like, such a slow motion thing. It's not that hard to correct, you know?
Yeah.
Or it's not that big of a deal in the long run anyway.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah. I had to cut a couple boards a couple extra times, just move some things
yeah.
around. But yeah, I love that type of project. I've also done some stuff on cars and things like that. In no way, shape, or form, don't call me for any car help. But but if I need to, change out some things in the engine, spark plugs, oil change, things like that. I've, done enough, tinkering around where I can figure things out and it feels good. I don't have to wait for
Yeah,
somebody to come change my tire. I can do it myself, or
yeah.
change my oil, or fix this or put this back together. So I think when you get that adaptability, and that's with everything, that's with sport, that's with just life in general. When you have a certain adaptability to yourself, you don't feel like you're ever in a situation that you can't handle. And
Yeah, hopefully,
I
right? I
mean,
think that's the goal. Yeah.
yeah, and I think that also of course plays into CrossFit as well with with
Mhm.
the methodology of like, hey, we practice for everything, so we can do anything. For the most part, within reason.
Sure. Yeah.
um You are also, you still ride the bike? Are you still on motorcycles?
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Uh, I've got the there. Nice.
Yep, yeah, try to ride like, there's boy, again, ancient history now, but this will be 20 years riding motorcycles for me. I got my first motorcycle in 2003, and for many years, I didn't own a car. There was a period of my life where I could say that I'd put more miles on a motorcycle than I had in a four-door car. In the cage, brother,
Nice.
But, that's obviously no
Yeah.
longer true. I don't think that's close by a mile now. But yeah, I mean, I think I'm always gonna have, a motorcycle and use it as just a primary mode of transport whenever I can. And that's true today, you know what I mean? Like, if I have the option between, "Oh, I gotta go drive somewhere or I can ride," I'm like, "Yeah, I'm gonna ride." Like, why wouldn't I? It's just a way more fun experience. As far as,
Yeah.
like, major trips, I haven't done any major trips since I moved here. When we did move here, though, I did ride, from Oakland to Nashville, which was a lot of fun. That was a really
Oh,
cool
wow.
cool experience, yeah. And I kinda broke it up in legs and had, like, a couple friends from California came with me as far as the Grand Canyon. They turned around, then I had a solo stretch to Dallas, and then some friends met me in Dallas and, kinda came the last few legs. So it was cool to kinda chunk it out that way.
Yeah.
And I love that kinda long distance riding, like, I could do that forever, that was actually one of the things I wanted to do this year, but it's just not gonna pan out. I was like, "Oh, 20 years riding, I should do like a San Francisco to New York kinda ride," but it's just not in the cards this year. So I'm trying to scheme how I can pull that off in the next year or so.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, you gotta travel around to different sites, so, just
Right?
Be like,
You
"I'll
know?
be there. I'll be there.
Yeah.
Just tell me
It'll
where,
take me a couple days, but I'll
yeah,
get there.
I'll get there." It's a work trip, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Then maybe they'll pay for my gas. That'd be
There you go. That's awesome. That's fun. It's something that I wanna do, but with 4 kids, my wife is like, yeah, you no."
Yeah. Well, I'll also say, like, I talk to a lot of people that are like, "Oh, I wish I could ride, but, dangerous, this and that." I'm like, "Yeah, it is dangerous. There's no question about that." And, of course, the follow-up to that is like, "Well, it's not you, it's the other drivers." And they're like, "Yeah, absolutely. People are
Yeah, oh,
gonna
yeah.
kill you, so you gotta act accordingly."
Yep.
Um, but also, like, I am not a hot dogger on a motorcycle. I never have been. Don't care. Like, I've
Yeah.
ridden with plenty of people. I don't have to prove anything at this point. And, sometimes you get in a group and people want to, show you how good a rider they are, or what they can do or whatever. I'm like, yeah, go, great. Like, I don't could not care less.
Yeah.
I am very quiet in that part of my mind that needs to take that kind of risk.
Be like, "I've been doing
Um,
this 20 years and haven't died,
yeah,
so I think I'm
exactly.
pretty good."
Yeah, yeah. And it's not like, I would say I'm just very comfortable with my riding ability. Like, I know where I can push and where I'm going to be uh, fine, and what's over my line. And I just don't feel the need to push that. So yeah.
Yeah, and I drive for work, so I see all types, and I know exactly what you're talking about. It's like you have to worry
Mhm.
about everybody else.
Yeah. Well,
And
and
I
there's lots of riders that are just total, like, they're just ridiculous in their approach.
oh, yeah.
I'll say that as much too. Like, there's plenty of people out there on bikes that are doing things that you're like, dude, come on now.
Yeah.
You are a traveling organ donor at this point. Like, you can see it.
Yeah. Yeah, the guys that take off and,
Yeah.
and full wheelie from the red light. I'm like, "Come on, guys. You know, yeah, you look cool until somebody pulls out in front of you, and then you
Mm,
can't do anything about it." Um, so couple more minutes left, but I want to throw it in your court back to the music genre. If you
yeah.
were to put together a band, like,
Right now that I'm playing
like,
in,
or no,
what are we talking about here?
like an all-star band. You get to pick
Ugh.
some of your favorite people in the space. What type of band are you putting together and kind of piece that together?
Oh, like right now today, something that I want to. Okay, I need more information. This is a
Okay.
band that I want to show up and listen to, or this is a band
Yes.
that I want to sit in with, or like, what are we talking here?
I mean, it can be both, but I would
Okay.
say one that you would wanna go see, you're like, "Oh my gosh, these people are together and they're playing. I'm definitely going and watching that."
I mean, it's such a hard question because I'm like, I don't even know where to start. Like, what genre are we looking at? I'm scrambling. I'm trying to cover for my blanking out here.
Yeah, because like, I
And
have
I
pe
also feel like it's difficult because I'm like, though that already exists. Like, most of the bands that I'm like, oh man, I would love to see. Oh, they do play together,
yeah.
and that's why they're awesome. I don't know. Uh, I don't know, man. I'm drawing a blank. I
No, it's
got
all
I
good.
got nothing.
So then I'll put it this way, is there a band that you have not seen or would like to see living or dead, like, current or past, that you would've liked to see or would like to see?
Yeah, I mean, I could give the cliche answer. Like, I was talking to David Hippensteel about a year ago, and he just like casually kind of slipped it out there that he saw Hendrix when he was like a kid. I was like, what? Like, okay, cool. Like,
Yeah,
that happened.
yeah,
So I mean, that would be amazing, obviously, to go back and see some of those like early acts like that just had such a crazy influence on the culture. Um, People I would love to see but haven't. There's this Japanese band called Boris. They're actually coming through town soon, so I'm hoping I'll be able to get a chance to see them. Love to see them. Um, let me think who else. Um, Live or dead? Like, definitely, if I could go to any one place at any time and be transported into like that person at their time in their place, like just killing it,
mhm.
it would be Fela Kuti at his Calcutta club in like the late '60s. I think that would be just a singular experience.
I'm gonna have to look that up.
Yeah. So
Like,
that to
oh,
me
man.
is like ultimate. I think if you could, yeah, okay, I'm gonna go with that. I'm gonna put my stamp on that. Like, living or dead, who would I want to see? This is dead. This is a long time ago in like another continent, a very different place. That would be where I'd want to go.
Okay,
Yeah,
and what genre? Like, what is the genre?
Afro funk.
Afrophone. Okay,
Yeah, he kind of like I don't wouldn't. I mean, maybe it's not fair to say he invented the genre, but like he was a big driver of it.
sure.
Yeah, and he's like he was a pretty controversial figure in a lot of ways. You know, like I think he declared sovereignty on his own little compound from the Nigerian government. He's like, we are our own country, and didn't work out so great for him. But you know, that's the kind of guy he was.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love, like, kind of going down genres and rabbit holes with, like, different, different types of musicians and things like that. So, like,
Hmm.
if I'm, building bands, some of the people that I've seen aren't even people that are part of, like, real bands. Obviously, it'd be, easy to say, "Oh, yeah, Travis Barker," or somebody like that for, like, a drummer, and then, piece together, different people.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Man, a lot of times that doesn't work though. I mean, how many
yeah,
super bands are actually worth anything other
very
than like
true.
name recognition? You know, like more often than not, it comes off as a flop.
Yeah. So, and I gotta get to more festivals and music and things like that too, so
No,
we
dude, you
get a
got 4 kids. Come on.
I
You
know,
got
I
you have
know.
the power of the internet at your fingertips. Don't worry about it. Festivals are
Yeah.
overrated.
Well, we put shows and, like, we'll put music, like, our kids love music, and they're kinda getting to that age where they're starting to, like,
Oh,
enjoy
that's fun.
music, but
Yeah.
they're also in that age where I'm like, "Hey, your music is crap."
Well, they think the same thing, so
Yeah, then
sure.
they listen to ours and they're like, "What are you listening to?" I'm like, "This is the best." But I've introduced all of them to rock. My boys are always like, "Turn on rock music," so I'll put on,
Awesome.
one of the stations, and they'll just sit in the back and just bang their head and, put their hands up and stuff like that, and just, you gotta teach them in the way. 'Cause I don't remember that from my parents. Like, my parents,
Mm,
I grew up in a very religious, um,
okay. Yeah.
upbringing where, rock and roll was the devil. And, you know, my older brother, he's 6.5 years older than me, he would hide, cassette tapes in his jacket because we live in Florida and nobody uses jackets. So he'd hide the cassette tapes in his jacket pockets, to go back and listen to. You know,
Amazing.
I think he bought Def Leppard Hysteria probably 7 or 8 times because every time my parents would find it,
Confiscated.
they'd confiscate it, break it, throw it away. So
A
he'd
true
go and
fan
buy it.
right there.
But Def Leppard is like one of my earliest memories of, that Hysteria
Yeah.
album
Yeah.
was one of my earliest memories of music because my brother listened to it. So if I was ever, going somewhere with him, he'd have Def Leppard,
Oh, that's cool.
Poison, Poison, Great White, like all those 80s, 80s and 90s hair band.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I grew up on, So I didn't
That's fun.
have like parents teaching me music. So it's
Mm,
been
yeah.
cool kind of being able to show my kids, hey, this music is cool. Listen to this. And they're starting to like some of those
Yeah.
as well. So
That's super cool. Yeah, I had like my dad. It was always he's definitely like a rocker at heart. Also, you know, like his favorite singer of all time was Joe Cocker, and
nice.
yeah, he's English as well. So there's a bit of a connection there as well. And anyway, yeah, I had a lot of memories like driving to school in elementary school and things like that, and there'd always be blues or Joe Cocker or like Dire Straits on the radio, stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
So that is cool that you're gonna have that connection with your kids. I think that's great.
Yeah. So it's a lot of fun. But well, man, boss, thank you so much for doing this and coming on the show and kind of,
My
cutting it up
pleasure.
with me.
Yeah,
I'm looking forward to, wherever we may land next year.
yeah,
And
me too.
it, and I'll kind of end with this, and you may have to tell me no comment and all that sort of stuff, but
Okay,
which
sounds
which
good.
I totally get. But like semifinals also is kind of a big question mark that I don't think I've heard anybody talking about. Um, do yeah, what's the deal with with
Yeah,
semifinals?
we'll be announced. I'll say this. You know, we are
Yeah,
trying to keep consistency from year to year as best we can, while still operating in a way that we think is going to be the best final product. So, oh man, I guess no comment,
sure.
but I think people can expect like the season is going to be familiar.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Which is great to hear. That's, I love stability,
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Sure.
unknown and
We all
unknowable is
do.
great. Unknown and unknowable is great for training. But
Yeah. Yeah.
but for other things,
Could be
for
pretty turbulent sometimes. Yep.
yeah. So, well, awesome, man. Thank you so much for doing this, and, man, I'm looking forward to, the next few weeks and months to see what kinda happens, and then, of course, going into the next season.
Yeah, right on, man. Well, I appreciate you, and thanks for having me. I'm glad that we got a chance to connect a little bit, both at the games and now.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much.
Anytime.